Welcome back to JHGWoodCraft. I'm Jedi Hammond, and today we're going to be working on some cherry side tables. So we're going to be taking just some raw lumber, take it all the way from that raw wood all the way through to having some really nice finished cherry and purple heart furniture with, of course, our signature hidden compartments. So with that, grab a drink and let's get started. Now that we got them all cut down to size, we're going to go ahead and rip the edges off, get a nice clean edge, and then we're also going to join, or actually I'm going to use the planer to clean up the edges and get a nice tight joint since I don't have a joiner yet. So that'll be next. All right. And that you saw at the end was a perfect example of why you have the runoff table, which I do have. It's modular. I was just being lazy and didn't move it. Okay, next up, we're gonna true up the edges for the tabletop. I'm gonna take these pieces here. These will work. They'll make it through. Keep them down low so they're nowhere near the blade. And we'll see what kind of mix-up I end up in. Okay, moment of truth. These guys join up. Nice clean edges. It's looking good after I plane off the tops and flatten them out. Ooh, that one doesn't look as good. There's definitely a little more there that needs to be done. Yeah, we got a little bit of a bow here. All right, we're not quite ready there. Unless works out. And that's the advantage of doing it all together, because if it's going to curve, it's all going to curve the same. But I don't like the grain pattern as much this way. Okay, so I think what we're going to do, that's nice and tight. It actually looks pretty nice together like that. It's just this joint here. That's what happens when you don't have a joiner. Because we're going to run it through a couple more times. All right, let's try this again. Oh yeah, mucho better. Mucho better. What do you think of that? How about them beans, right? That's looking nice. All right, and what we're going to end up with is we're also going to have, I'll put a strip, I think I'm going to put a strip of Purple Heart in here. All right, we're going with a 22-inch length and an 18-inch wide. So if we're going 15 3/16, we can fudge it a little bit. So we're going to rip this guy to 3 inches. Now that we've got the Purple Heart jointed on both sides, we're ready to figure out where that would go. Some of this is just a matter of kind of what you think looks good. Of course, it's not going to look exactly right because it's dimensioned a little bit different. So we're going to plane them all down to get wood. I don't mind a little bit of sapwood, but where it kind of lines up. That's what we're looking for. What we think looks good. Move this guy over here. Oh yeah, there we go. That's got the right feel to it. Not really a science there, more of an art, just the way that it looks to you. All right. So now we're ready to plane these down, get them all to the same depth. And then once we have them the same thickness, depth thickness, then we can glue them together. And we'll just kind of put some glue into each joint, put clamps on them, hold it all together, let that dry. Through here. All right, so we got a little bit of a problem on this, in that this board is a little bit warped. And I thought by right on this side, that as it would go through the planer, it would cut off the middle a little bit at a time, so it's going real slow. It does not seem to be resolving the problem. So instead, we're going to put on the sled and shim it up just a little bit so that when it goes through, it takes off that corner first. I got one of these new Rockler clamps that are specifically made for this, and we'll see how well I do with it the first time. Next thing we're going to do is take those top boards that we've got, the surface for the tables, and we're going to go and do a mill plane on them, clean up the glue, make sure those surfaces are completely flat. I'm at 0. Advanced. Mill plane, scan. Actually, I think I want to do a Y scan. Because I have observed that it seems to perform better going the with the grain. Also helps to go the longer side first. So the depth here, I'm going to do 0.30, I think is what I want. Z-step is 100. Actually, I'm going to make this 40. No, 30 is good. The Z-step will make it 150. 15. Oops. Point 150. Okay, how this goes. So it's kind of mesmerizing. I can sit here and watch the CNC all day long. In fact, I've thought about doing a live CNC feed. Let me know in the comments if that's something you would find interesting. If so, we can set that up. Wanted to tell you about another thing that happened during this build. At one point, the CNC decided to take a dive. And what I mean by that is the bit started going down further and further, digging in. Initially, I thought that my board was moving, but after stopping it and taking a look, it didn't appear that it had shifted. It looked like the CNC had actually gone down. And I don't know if I messed up a setting or what. You can check out the other video on YouTube under JHGWoodCraft to see what that actually ended up looking like. But yeah, that was not a fun day. That was a sad time. Next step after those are dried up is to go ahead and remove all of that little excess glue before we can stick them in the planer and just finalize our mill plane on the top and bottom. Be sure we got them nice and flat. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to identify which side is the bottom, and then that's the side that's going to go down because I'm going to route a chamfer along all 4 edges. Little thing, of all the accidents that happen in wood shops, router is one of the #1 because it will try and take off with your wood piece like nobody's business. So you got to be really, really careful. So make sure you look at the speeds you need for your bits, and then be very careful when you're going through. It will, like I said, it'll grab your piece and either pull you through into the bit or kick it back like a missile. So something to be cautious of. I've already ran a test piece through, you saw earlier, to make sure I've got the angle that the angles is static, but to be sure that I've got the depth that I want. And it's really just a matter of looks. Nothing specific. I just like about that height. So tested on a piece of material, same width, actually cut off from this piece. And now we're going to run this through it. And hopefully this is the point where something goes wrong, I kick and scream, because then I got to start over again. What you see here is we're cutting down a 2.5-inch piece of cherry, rough cut. We've marked out legs on it, so instead of getting individual pieces already cut to kind of 2x2, we're cutting this down to get the legs exactly the size and also angle that I want. We're going with a modern look, but we also want it to have a little bit of a taper to it. So we saw off screen, or we didn't see off screen rather, because we lost some of the footage, was just marking these out in the discussion around that layout. So that first cut that I just did, that's going to be at a little bit of an angle. This second cut is going to be a straight. Next one will be angled, so on and so forth. And then we'll line these legs up and kind of clean them up all together to be sure that they match up the same across all legs. Now what I've done is taken the legs, clamped them all together, and I'm running the sander over them to get them all at the same height and level, kind of smooth out all of the jagged lines. Ultimately, I do get a joiner and run them through that as well, but this gets me, so I've got all of them essentially looking exactly the same. So if there's a variance in one of them, it's in all of them, but that way when you're looking at the table once it's complete, you just see the legs as the same, right? You don't see one looks a little thicker, or hey, how come this one's got a wider bottom than a top, and that kind of thing. So that's essentially what we're doing here by sanding the legs down. We are onto the apron. So that's the piece that goes around the top, just underneath the tabletop. So we cut those pieces to size, and then we're going to give them a nice straight edge on both ends. That'll give us a way we can rip against those and get nice clean edges. Make sure we got them all the right size. Okay, because I decided to do these as tapered legs, there is an angle on them, and I'm kind of building out a form on these. Do is put a square up against the ground here, or the side here. I want these to ultimately be 19 inches the outside. So I'm cheating here. That board 19 to the outside. Make sure it's squared up. And I gotta say, one of the things I've repeatedly noticed is that if I just go off of measurements without verifying physically, I often screw up because my memory's not the best. So by doing this, I ensure that I'm in the right spot and my line will be right. So I'm literally marking where I'm going to cut these guys over here. If these things are popular and I end up with much more of them being sold, I'll probably do is build myself a quick form that I can set these in, mark it, and it'll speed this whole process up. But before I go through the added effort of building out the forms, I want to make sure this is something that you all want. So turns out every once in a while I do something right. These are 1-degree angles, so that's what I'd originally planned for this, but by the time I'm done cutting, I always worry that it turned out exactly the way I planned, just to be honest. So it did, which is awesome. So I got to cut 2 more of these with that 1-degree angle, same width. And then, like I said, we're putting a notch across here like this. And so that'll be where our crossboard will go in to just give it some added stability. All right, at this point, we did use the CNC to cut out those notches for us. Now that I have a plan, I can make this consistent. You could do this with a chisel pretty easily, or just a regular standard router. I've got the 2 sides together and mirrored the slot on both of them. And you can see where you just kind of do a quick cutout, and that's where on either side our bracing bar will go. We just got to make sure we got all the sides sanded up for the apron. That'll be our final, not final sand, but final sand before assembly. All right, come to the point where we're going to assemble the apron to the legs. I'm going to do essentially this same thing all across all the legs, but we're going to use a biscuit joiner. Easy for me to say. No, it's not biscuits like your biscuits and gravy like you'd have down here in the South. Looks nothing like them, in fact. It's those little discs on the table. What the saw is doing is it just basically cuts a slot. And once that slot's cut, it lines it up for you so you ensure that you've got everything in the right place. Add a little bit of glue, drop that biscuit in there, and then clamp it up. And that gives you a really nice, strong connection with the wood, as well as making that completely invisible. So you can't see how we're fastening those two pieces of wood together. So you got the glue, you've got the biscuit, and you've got an invisible joint. You could join it in other ways, but this is the way I decided to do it for this build. So other ways you could do this is you could use a mortise and tenon, where you cut out the hole and you essentially dig out the end of your apron, stick it in the hole. You could use pegs, right, or dowels and holes. You could also use what's called a pocket screw, where you're drilling at an angle and putting a screw in. Finally, you could face nail it. Would not be the best way for it to look, but if you're doing something rough or you want that real country look to it, then that's another way you could do it. Now we've got our frame all built up. We're looking at that front face. The reason for going real picky about that, I'm gonna check it, sand it a little bit, check it again, take it down a little bit more, is because this is going to be our hidden drawer front. So we want it to go exactly perfectly between those legs. We don't want it to be tight, because otherwise it will pull the sealant off, or it will scratch the sides when it goes in and out. But we want it as tight as we can get it without actually touching. The reason for that is it's a hidden drawer, so you don't want to see those seams. You don't see it on the rest of the table, so you want the seams on the drawer to be real tight as well. So that's why we do a lot of back and forth on that. Okay, we're going to go over to the CNC, and we're going to use it to cut out the groove for the bottom of the drawer, as well as the finger joints for connecting the drawers up together. You can do this by hand. You could do that with a dovetail tool. So there's multiple ways you could build that, or you could even just simply glue them and surface nail the drawer faces together. I like the use of the CNC. I think it's kind of fun to be able to do that with it. It did take me a little bit to figure out all of the various little ins and outs doing it on the CNC, since this would be the first time I've used that to cut dovetails, or pins rather. But it's interesting. So again, you don't have to use this method to do it. You could absolutely go and just do it by hand, or use a jig to do your dovetails. Now, one thing I would have done differently, you might have noticed that wood started to come up just a little bit. So if I do this again, I will use a down cut bit instead of the regular end mill that I used to cut that out. But that should take care of that. Now that we have the pieces cut on the CNC, we're going to assemble our drawer faces, or drawer insides. So here you can see these are just made out of pine. You can see the pieces, they go together. I'm going to tap these together, make sure everything fits nicely, then pull them back apart, sand it all up nicely, glue it, and good to go. we're just going to cut down some 1/4 inch oak, and that will become our drawer base, or our drawer bottoms. Slide that guy in and lots of races. Okay, now my favorite part, the sanding. Actually, it's not my favorite part. I hate sanding, but it needs to be done, makes it all look pretty. So we're going to continue with our sanding montage.
One hour later.
And we're finally done with the sanding. That's exhausting. Okay, next step, we're going to assemble our drawers, and then we'll assemble the top of our tables, including the legs, and then mount the drawers into it. So, next step, drawers. Okay, we're starting our final sealing of our material here. I'm using a Danish oil and polyurethane mixture. I really like the way it comes out. Got the poly for a little bit of an extra sheen and protection, and the Danish oil, just really, really nice look. Anyway, so that's a mixture of half and half, and you just wipe it on and let it dry. You don't want to get it on too thick. You want to get kind of just a real even, light coat. So once that's all sealed up, then we'll be moving on to our final assembly. So we're getting close to the finish line here. Here you can see we've sealed the top already, and then we're going back over it to kind of smooth it out, give it a nice sheen. Using a very high grit sandpaper. So, you know, up there in the thousands. This one, I think it's running right now is about 2,000. And not spending a whole lot of time on it. As you can see, just a pattern of left, right, up, down. As we get that smoothed out, kind of polished, if you will, and then we'll put a final sealing coat on top of that smooth finish. Well, we've reached my favorite part of all the other favorite parts. Today, we're going to finally finish out the assembly of our side tables. Now that everything's stained, or sealed, it's had time to cure. So now we're ready to finish putting it all together, and we'll have our tables ready to sell. For this, we're just simply going to use these things called Z-clips, or tabletop fasteners. You saw earlier where we put the grooves in here. You can see that. Oh, up there. All right, see those cuts that we made with the biscuit joiner? So we got those cuts in, and we're gonna just take and put a clip in each one of those cuts and screw it down. And that will hold it straight. Of course, we want to align it centered on our top first. The reason why we want to use those clips is to ensure that as the wood expands and contracts, that it doesn't bind up, twist out our actual table frame. So first things first, check our front and back. Those set. We got a splinter somewhere in there. Take our clips. Put them along here. And just fasten them down. Almost made a mistake. Probably would be fine. But dealing with something to put this much work into, probably better to go ahead and do a pre-drill. The last thing we want is any splits in a almost completely finished piece of furniture. Okay. And here's a trick we're going to use on this, the tape trick. Just use a little piece of tape wrapped around my drill bit to ensure that I don't drill too far. It really doesn't matter what that looks like, as long as it gives me an indicator of where that should be. Okay, now that I position that, I've got all the holes identified. I'm actually going to pull this aside so I can drill straight down on these. And not scuff up the edge of my material. somewhere along the lines, I got a little sliver. Guess that's what goes along with the okay, our top is on. Now I gotta put our legs on, our bottom shelf on, and you'll notice you've got a little bit of play here. So when I put those bottom, well, not so much here, but here and here. So that bottom shelf is gonna do two things. It's gonna help with additional stability and also gives it a little more of a finished look. Stick that on there, you're ready to go. Okay. So because we've already set these, I have the advantage of being able to go, okay, well, I got a screw. Get this lined up here. I'm just gonna barely set it, right? Okay. Same deal here. But before I do that, let's see, I'm just making sure everything aligns right first. All right, there we have it. Let's turn it up, make sure I don't have any squeeze out on the back side, or clean up the squeeze out. A little bit. All right, put our drawer back in. And away we go. There you have it. Our first, well, not first, but first of this pair done and ready to go. Well, I hope you enjoyed that build as we built out some new cherry side tables. Those ones will be for sale on Etsy as well as our online store. If there's anything else you'd like us to put on this channel or to build for you, let us know down in the comments or hit us up on social media or the website. As always, like and subscribe. Let us know what you'd like to see next. And with that, it's my turn to go have a drink.